Have you ever heard the phrase that God draws straight with crooked lines? God draws straight with crooked lines. I think the lessons from 2 Samuel these days have taught us that very lesson. Let's look at that a bit. We're learning about David over many, many weeks as we go. And last week we heard about David's indiscretion. Here he is, the most powerful king, both king of Judah and Israel, powerful but beyond means. And what does he do? Well, he falls into adultery and ultimately murder. He follows this lady, he finds her very, very beautiful, invites her to his home and prevails upon her. And she ends up being pregnant with that child. She tells David about that, and David says, oh my gosh, if Uriah, her husband, ever finds out, that's going to be the end of something here. So let's do something about it. So he calls Uriah back in, and he kind of invites him to go back to his house and sleep with his wife, which he refuses to do because he said, my men are in the field fighting. Should I go home and have that pleasure? No way. So he didn't go. Well, that didn't work. So he called Uriah in and he got him drunk. Now go back. And he still didn't go back. And so now he says, now what am I going to do? Well, the only thing that's left is to get rid of this guy. And so he sends Uriah with a note to the general, indicating that the general should put Uriah in the front end and let him die. Uriah bears the note that says that to him, prompted by David. And that happens. Uriah is killed in the battle. So he comes back, and he realizes that Uriah is dead. And then we pick up the story in today's reading, saying he invites Bathsheba to come to his home, and he ends up marrying her there. Then Nathan, the good prophet, comes to David and tells him that story about the little ewe lamb, and David is irate. That man should be killed. And then that powerful statement, David, you are the man. And David goes, ah. He never saw it that way before. He's opened up to seeing himself as a really big sinner in the eyes of the Lord. Big. And what does he do? Well, I think one of the things he does is create the psalm that we prayed today. He wrote this psalm in light of himself thinking about what he did. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your loving kindness. In your great compassion, blot out my offenses. Wash me through and through from my wickedness and cleanse me from my sin. He's begging God, forgive him. He goes on in verse 8. Purge me from my sin and I shall be pure. Wash me and I shall be clean indeed. Goes on with verse 10. Hide your face from my sins and blot out my iniquities. Create in me a clean God, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Nathan comes to David again and says, yes, God has forgiven you. God has forgiven you. And David thinks that because of this great sin, he should die on the spot. And God says, no, I'm going to use something different. Here's where God is drawing straight with a crooked line. This little baby is sick. And God uses it to teach David. When David realizes that this little boy is born, is sick, he goes in and the scripture says he lays on the floor. He will not eat. He will not talk. He cries and he begs and he prays. And he did this for a solid 7 days, begging God to save this little boy. And the little boy dies. Now his attendants are around David, and they come to him and say, David, eat. David, clean up. David, get up. Move, move. And he doesn't move. He doesn't eat. And they say, what are we going to do when we tell him that the boy died? He's really going to do something bad then. And he sees them whispering, and he says, I know what's going on. I bet you the baby died. And they said, yeah, the baby's dead. David gets up, cleans himself up, starts to eat, and resumes his life. And they said, this is strange. When the baby was sick, you were doing all this stuff, crying and begging and whatever, and now that he's dead, look at you. And he said, well, of course. When the baby was ill, I was begging God to save him. Begging him. And I thought maybe he would do that for me, save the little boy's life. But now that he's dead, I can't bring him back. All I can do is wait for me to go and join him. And so I'm back to this again. And then he prays this wonderful prayer to be forgiven. God draws straight with crooked lines. He uses the death of this little boy to charge David up to realize the greatness of his sin and to beg forgiveness, and God gives it. God grants it to him. In fact, he grants it such a way that he says, now, when you have a baby with Bathsheba, guess what you're going to call him? You're going to call him Solomon. Solomon, born of Bathsheba and David, the next king that comes up, showing that God has forgiven. All the way through, we see this kind of thing happen. The people today in the reading that we had asked Jesus, what must we do to do the will of God? And he says, you must believe in the one whom he has sent. Now we see evidences of that all the way through. Think about the thief on the cross, the thief next to Jesus on the cross. He doesn't say to Jesus anything, forgive me. What he says to Jesus is, remember me when you get to your kingdom. He believes that Jesus has a kingdom to go to. He believes in Jesus. And what does Jesus say immediately? Today you will be with me in paradise. Today your sins are forgiven. I will take you in with me. Because of that belief. This little belief comes in all sorts of different ways where we can be jarred loose and say, oh, that's where God is. That's where I'm at. My sins are great. I can go to God and confess them and he will take them away. And I will be free from my sins. I can do that. Because if he can forgive David for all those grossly wonderful, awful sins, he can certainly forgive me from what I do. It's a great boost for us to learn that. I learned a really cute little story about another kind of awakening. There was a lady who had no love for religion, did not like it at all, but yet was disquieted within her. And she was walking along on a Sunday morning, and she came upon a church, and she said, you know what? I'm not going there. And so she went into the church. And the preacher was in there reading from the Gospel of the King James Version. Now, it's got to be the King James Version that does this to her. Listen to this. The text that day was Luke 15, 1-2, which the pastor read from the King James Version, and it went like this. Then drew near him all the publicans and sinners for to hear him. And the Pharisees and scribes murmured, saying, this man receiveth sinners and eateth with them. But she didn't hear that word eateth that way. Her name was Edith. Her name was Edith. And eateth with them. And she said, I'm with them. I'm with Jesus. And it changed her. All these little things that God uses to change people and to bring him into his faith. And that faith will produce in us forgiveness of sins and entrance into the kingdom of heaven. We are so blessed that have that kind of God, that he is welcome and willing to forgive us even our grossest sins, provided we confess them with our heart, believe in Jesus, and then go out and live it. Live the life that Jesus asked. We're free. We just get a load lifted off of our heads. And we go through life with that because he is there. We are there. He loves us. And we eateth with him. Amen.